were looking at the energetic updates, a big, strong message came through from different channels, and this is not everybody. It's actually a minority of individuals who are feeling this, but it's strong enough that it creates a question mark about what to do next, or what's important now, or where do I go from here type energy. And it's basically to do with, well, now that we're just being and not doing, do I continue to process? Do I bother to meditate? Do I continue learning things? Do I continue working on my ascension? And all those are questions that came up for individuals who were looking at, well, if it's over, then what's the point type thing, or what do I do now? Which again, it's like, what do I do now? Yeah, rather than what do I be now, or what am I now? And so the three of us have been looking at this to be able to address it in ways in which it can be understood. And several things came up for us. One of them, from my personal perspective, would have been that the processing has never been the journey. Yeah, and there's a big difference between a journey of ascension and or the walking through a path, or being the path. And so it's like the doing and the being of ascension is different somehow, but it's extremely subtle. Yeah, and I always still encourage each individual to process, and I process every day, because it's the difference between responding and reacting. Yeah, so if something makes me react, I'm not being myself. I'm not being in integrity. I'm not being complete. I'm reacting. I'm doing something according to some other stimuli. Yeah, so I immediately process it so that I stop doing that. In a way, I go back to my center. I go back to my beingness. It's simply a tool. And I think something you said, Victoria, was really cool, that you said, well, it's a choice between suffering or not suffering. And I thought that was really good as well, because suffering is basically a very low vibration. And when we choose not to be in that low vibration, we are manifesting our true selves. We're not low vibration, basically.
Yeah. Just to, did you want to say more, or shall I
No, go
jump
ahead.
in here? Several things occurred to me to bring up in light of this conversation. And actually, I have to give credit where credit is due. I think Lucia's the one who said, it's a question. I think I made up the title after that. To suffer or not to suffer? Processing is the question. but when we have an unprocessed ego, we have programs in our unconscious that cause those reactions. So this tool of processing is a way to make those unconscious things conscious, and to end the polarization, so that we come into that place of oneness, of beingness. And then when a stimuli occurs from a place of non-judgment, non-polarization, non-reactivity, a place of pure beingness, we can then respond. And so it's interesting to watch that what I recognize happening is there are states in what Leslie has described as the upward and downward spiral. Those of you who've read The Marriage of Spirit know about this. Way down on the downward spiral, there is a state of attention. It's a vibration. It's an emotional experience of something called meaninglessness. And it's very uncomfortable, and it's pure suffering. And what I saw happening was a strand of that energy coming in, of meaninglessness. And that meaninglessness was triggered by this misunderstanding about doing and being. Because, stay with me here, I'm going to just try and describe a little loop in consciousness here. If we feel that by meditating and processing, we are ascending our vibration, that is true. But if the ego takes that as an egoic doing, a striving for something, that is actually that programming in the ego that needs validation from succeeding. So that program of doing in order to succeed basically, kind of torques the whole trajectory and co-ops the purity and the capacity for this ascending in vibration to be more spontaneous, and it actually moves it into a place of pure striving for success. And that's a program. That's just an egoic program. So that aspect that was taking the journey of ascension and making it a trajectory of doing things in order to succeed, that aspect had the rug pulled out from under it and dropped right into this pit of meaninglessness, which is right there next to worthlessness and destitution, right at the bottom of the vibratory spiral. So what we're saying here is to see this for what it is, understand that we just start from where we're at. And when we first start the journey of ascension, most of us are coming purely from our egos. And so our ego is kind of running the show. But at a certain point along this journey, or a certain point while the ascension is happening, we want to let the ego step aside and not be running this show. And I was telling Inelia and Lucia the other day, I feel like this is kind of like the crossing the Rubicon in your ascension, in this journey of ascending your vibration. So,
before you go on, can you explain what that means, what that term means? Because I've never heard of it before.
Which term?
Crossing the Rubicon.
Oh, the Rubicon. Oh, it's a reference to, I think it was the Roman history or something. It's like crossing the Rubicon was the deciding point between whether something could happen or not happen. It's like, it's like an important, it's an important stumbling block to get beyond.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry. It's just one of those phrases. In fact, I don't even know the history, so I probably shouldn't use that phrase. Somebody on the call will know the historical meaning of it. But I think it was something with the Roman armies, like if they could cross the Rubicon, then they could take some, new territory or something.
Okay.
So it's an important part of the journey when it's like, that's what I call spiritual ego, when the ego is running the spiritual journey. And when we can see that and start to let it go, then we're available to let these tentacles of doing to succeed be pulled off of this journey of just pure being. And you're just such a perfect example of this, Inelia. I mean, this is probably something you've never dealt with.
You're right. I've had a big problem trying to
follow what I'm saying.
Yeah, to grasp what's happening, because it's so it's difficult for me to conceptualize that especially when you mentioned the other day, there's individuals who have been doing transcendental meditation for 40 something years and they haven't transcended, and it's because they're doing. Yeah. They're
Yeah,
doing meditation, they're doing their little practice. They're not being.
exactly.
And it's really difficult for me to grasp, but I understand
Yeah,
when
yeah,
you describe it, I can see it,
yeah.
but I still haven't actually grasped it so that I can, you know, get it into my understanding fully. But I sense it. It's a sense at the
It
moment.
creates tension. It creates tension, and what it does is it blocks the capacity to surrender.
Mm.
Maybe that's another way to put it. It disallows the capacity to fully just surrender and allow what is there to be perceived and experienced.
Mm.
And it usually it means that we subscribe to a lot of belief systems about how it should be, and then we look for something to align with how we think it should be. And all of these things just get in the way of being able to just let go and be. So I'm coming from the place of having experienced all these things
Mm-hmm.
and having kind of lived through it with other people as well. So does that make more sense when I phrase it
Yeah,
like that?
yeah, it does. Yeah, yeah. What I'm perceiving is, um, I was talking to a friend the other day, and she was telling me that she was doing a course in Kundalini energy or Kundalini meditation or something. I can't remember exactly what she was doing. And it was a teaching that had been taught for many hundreds of years. And she said it was extremely strict with her diet, what she could or not drink. When the teacher arrived, she had to be in a certain position, and the positions had to be held for a certain very precise time, and the movements have to be done in a very exact manner in order to activate or to bring forth the Kundalini energy. And then when she managed to do various of these things, she felt the energy and she thought, oh my goodness, but I can do that just by thinking about it or not even just willing it, and it's there. I don't have to do all this stuff. And when I was looking at that structure, it's like it's there all the time. That energy is in everybody all the time. We try to we block it off because we've been taught that any energies down there are to do with sex and we have to have sex or it's desire, which it isn't. It's just an interpretation. Yeah, that's
Mm-hmm.
also another path or doing. But
Mm-hmm.
the energy is there all the time. All you have to do is think about it or put your attention on it and it will burst out. Yeah, and then the other part of the exercises were to weave it through all the back of the spine, I think, all the way up to the upper chakras where you would then use it. I think, I don't know. I couldn't quite grasp it, but it was full of structure and methodology and
And
everything.
control.
Control, absolute and yeah, absolute control. And it was just, well, you put your attention in it, it's there, and then it explodes into every dimension possible in every direction possible. And then it's beautiful and you can do whatever you like. But it was that's what I am reminded of when you were talking about that, because
Mm-hmm.
it felt very much that it was a path that had been designed from somebody who was very much up in their brain, and they had to drill down all the way in absolute control to grasp this energy and pull it back up because they were afraid of it
Mm-hmm.
or something, but they had to control it. And that's what I'm seeing perhaps as that path of going down there when it's there all the time,
Mm-hmm.
and you go there, you can be there anytime. And I kind of that came up for me when you were describing it as in a way in which I can perhaps understand it. Yeah?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we can look at it in several ways. One is that some of these methodologies were evolved thousands of years ago, and maybe for that time it was necessary. Also, the one thing that in what you're saying that I just want to bring up, and that is the processing and meditation and all of these tools, all of these things that we've learned how to do, allow us to pull away the blockages. You know, there's a phrase, it's thinning the veils.
Mm-hmm.
It's like this programmed ego, the programming in the ego, the belief systems, the contracts, the commitments that are in the egos of people who've, you know, had more than, this isn't their first incarnation, they've had many incarnations, or even just a few. That stuff, which is it's actually has a physical component. It's in the physical body. It's in the subtle physical bodies. It's in the emotional bodies. That stuff blocks the capacity to just be and allow that energy. So some of these tools that we have are merely there to remove the blockages so that that energy can just simply be and go out in all these different dimensions. And I think what you keep pointing out is that because the energies of the world have shifted so dramatically, and the planetary ascension is such that that's much more available right now.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to just see the blockage and let it go and not have to go through all these contortions and eat a certain way and sit a certain, you know, all those things you were describing in order to access that energy. Yeah, does that kind of sound right?
Yeah, and the last piece, I suppose, is that once you activate it, you are that energy.
Yes.
So it's not an energy that's there and you can use and whatever. You actually are it.
Right, right. That's yourself. That's self-discovery.
Yeah.